maybe 5 years ago, a patient of mine said, "Hey, he started working with, you're a Kaizen. Have you ever heard of the term Kaizen?" He said, "Read the book. It's a Japanese philosophy." I googled it, and it's a philosophy that continuous small improvements can reap major improvements. And it's a Japanese cultural thing and a philosophy where like companies such as Toyota embrace this concept. And as I read them, I'm like, I totally agree with that. It's all about not accepting the status quo and to setting yourself to continuous improvement.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Happy Practice Playbook. I'm Mo Jones, and in each episode of the show, you'll hear conversations with dentists, office managers, staff, and specialists who know how to create a happy practice. Today, we're joined by Dr. Matt Nejad, an expert biomimetic and aesthetic dentist, as well as a fellow of the Academy of Biomimetic Dentistry. He also provides education and training through the Nejad Institute for Biomimetic Dentistry and is also a dental advisor for the Birdie Medical Review Board. Dr. Nejad, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and talk about my practice and dentistry.
I am very excited too, and it's really exciting because we are going over a topic that we haven't talked about on the show today, which I think our listeners will be very interested and gain a lot of insightful knowledge for. So we're in for a really good ride today. So everyone buckle up.
Awesome.
All right. So, of course, we always start our podcast with a little statistic. Today, our statistic is compared to 1 year ago, 69% of clinics say they have less time to spend helping patients because staff is occupied with other tasks. Have you seen this in your experience?
Oh, yes, of course. So I've been a practice owner since the day I graduated, actually. I graduated 2010, and I knew that type of dentistry I wanted to do, you needed to be in control of a lot of different things, the quality, the setup, the materials. So I started my own office, and I realized really fast that we have to juggle a lot of different responsibilities. And what we really want to do is focus on making our dentistry better. Like I want to spend every hour I can improving my craft, reading the science, practicing things, getting it more efficient. But you have to deal with HR and human resources and insurance and all these things. So I've been through a 12 solid years of learning and streamlining things to try to carve out more and more time to spend with patients. And I can totally understand and relate to how it's impossible to do some things. In fact, we're expected to do some things by either law or OSHA that are almost impossible. Like it's just so hard to micromanage every single aspect. It's really in favor of the big DSOs because they can have like the systems, the efficiency, everything in place. When you're smaller, it's just hard to be able to wear 10 different hats like that. So it's a fact. This is a true thing we're facing.
That seems super daunting to start a practice straight out of graduation. So what helped you get started with that?
What helped me get started is a few things. One is opportunity wasn't there. And instead of taking what I had available, I decided to create my own opportunity. It's like I realized I had a great mentor. He taught me this type of dentistry that is really catered towards quality and spending more time. It's really a fee for service type of product, but it's very rare to find a job opportunity, an associate position, et cetera, that would give you that amount of time and flexibility. So I had to, but I wasn't scared of it. And I also realized from a little bit, probably about like 5 years prior to that, I realized everything is an excuse. There's a lot of reasons we make up excuses and put up hurdles and say, I'm not ready yet. And I figured I'll learn as I go. And it was a small office, and I knew that I could manage it in a digestible way. I was literally seeing a morning patient and an afternoon. It was like an extension of dental school. I considered it like my residency. I'm going to start with two patients a day, learn how to run. I learned how to do insurance on my own, and I became very good at it. I had one employee, but I learned all the things. I devoted the time to learn things because I also have seen if you don't know how to do something, it's very hard to higher talent to do it, and that's why it's easy to make a lot of mistakes, be very inefficient, or not know better, because a lot of dentists and doctors don't know how to either bill insurance or how to use their practice management software. And you have to be able to be comfortable with all those different things. So I did it because I had to, basically, and I don't regret it at all. And I think that it kind of one step leads to the other, and you get further and further by facing these fears and eliminating obstacles and hurdles.
So little by little. And did you ever feel any setbacks when you had those small goals and you weren't able to necessarily meet them all right 100% every time?
Yeah, there's numerous times where, so I set realistic goals for myself. It was like, I want to grow. I want to have patients recognizing my differentiation. I want to leave insurance networks eventually. So I set them digestibly, and what I would do is periodically be looking at things, whether it be the numbers or patient satisfaction or scheduling or whatever, and keep adjusting. You have to make like little mid-course adjustments as you go, so that you can kind of steer towards that path. You won't get there by mistake, and everyone thinks it's like luck when you end up somewhere, but it's a series of decisions and hard work. There's a saying that I love: it's the harder you work, the luckier you get. But it's all about the fact that you are creating your luck and you're putting the time into it. So for me, when I had these setbacks, I took a step back, and instead of saying, look, it's not working, I had to figure out what to do. One random example of that was, I was making a website, and the website was going really well and it was getting some patients in. This was at a time when Instagram was becoming very popular, and I'm like, that's not for dentistry. That's just for sharing photos. I almost missed that whole bandwagon, but then I realized, you know what? It looks like a lot of people are really getting known and being discovered through that. So I went back. I had decided I'm not going to waste my time on Instagram. And I totally decided I need to change that, because after I looked at everything, I'm like, website is amazing, but Instagram is kind of what future generations are using to look for their content. They're not necessarily searching on the web. Sometimes they're going on Instagram and just looking at before and afters and cosmetic procedures and stuff like that. So I adjusted.
So looking at where we can improve and what needs to change versus where we went wrong, what helped you, right?
Yes, and systems and efficient, so that, and then establishing the systems that keep us moving in the right direction.
Have there been any particular systems that you have found the most helpful from when you started to your present day?
Yeah, so I'm huge on systems. My parents are engineers, and I see everything as trainable. I've had numerous instances in my career where a trusted staff, like later in my career, I have multiple employees. So I started with one, and now we have 12. I've had a certain employee who's a good, she has my best interests in mind, and she'll say things like, so and so can't learn, or this is how they are, and I don't believe it. I'm like, everyone, it's all about training, experience, and systems. Anybody Everybody can improve. Okay, there's a bare minimum. I think everybody can improve, especially if you believe in them and set the right system. So setting systems was amazing for me. I'm always trying to work on that, and one of the biggest ones was freeing up our time with insurance. We decided to go into fee for service because we wanted to spend more time with our patients. As you said, like 69% of, did you say it was 69% of time is spent on non-patient activities?
They have 69% or 69% they had less time to spend helping patients. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So whatever the amount of time that goes into it, it feels like almost 69% of the time does go into non-patient related activity. But being able to free up some of that time with insurance, being on the phone, specifically, we started using Weave in 2013. So I graduated 2010. I was an early adopter with Weave. I saw the benefit. We had internet so slow that you could barely use it, but we managed to get DSL, barely meet the requirements. Then a few years later, fiber. We were onboarded by one of the owners. Like literally, I was dealing with one of the owners, and people told me about that later. So the phone systems and Weave and text messaging and automating things really helped us a lot. And also spending less time on the phone. They go hand in hand, but minimizing how much time we have to spend on the phone, especially with non-patient related inquiries like insurance. So when we went fee for service over a series of years, that's freed up a lot of our time. So now when we are on the phone, we're dealing with an actual patient related to scheduling their treatment or following up with them. So it's higher value activities.
Okay, so this fee for service concept that you've adopted, for our listeners that may not know what that is, can you explain what that means and what it looks like?
Yeah. So in a fee for service setting, we are billing the insurance or courtesy submitting to the insurance for our patients. We're charging upfront. So I remember this. There was a time where I decided we should be charging at the time of scheduling. I'm putting a large amount of time for these procedures, up to 3 hours. And, like a quadrant of dentistry might be like 3 hour appointment. And very frequently it is 2, 3 hours. And if the patient doesn't show up, I'm dedicated to seeing that one patient, so that's a huge problem for me. So I said, I want to charge ahead of time. And I remember at that particular moment, my staff was like, oh, people are going to be so mad and they're not going to want to do that. I'm like, well, why? It's like, if you don't want to do it, don't schedule. And if you do, make sure that you're reserving that time and you have this sort of like sense of there's a commitment. So we did it, and they said it's not going to go well, and it went perfectly. It's been 5 or 6 years since then. Like it's become so normal. We've created that culture of we value our time, we also value your time. So we set aside a lot of time to work on patients, one patient at a time. We do charge at the beginning of treatment. We are very true to what we promise and we deliver. We have a very high satisfaction rate. If something's not right, we fix it. And we focus on treating our patients, being able to interact with them and talk to them and not feel like you have a rushed experience, because a lot of anxiety from treatment comes from this sort of like, multiple chair, high speed type of dentistry. And that's not for everybody. I do think that type of dentistry is very important to fill a role that's required, because not every patient wants what I'm offering. But there's plenty of patients that do want that. And that's what fee for service is really ideal for, because you're not limited by things such as the insurance fees or having to deal with if my insurance covers it. We've created the culture of, look, I'm telling you the truth and this is what I recommend, and my patients fully believe my treatments. And some of it's elective and some of it is more urgent due to like cavities, fractures, etc. And so there is some portions that are, delayed or not done. But when we recommend something, it's very rare that they have to say something like, I got to check my insurance, because even though they have insurance, they're not here for that. They're here for an elevated level of care.
So, with this fee for service concept that you have, it helps create an elevated experience for your patients and be able to give them the time and services that they need. But what are some of the roadblocks that comes with running a fee for service practice as well?
Well, the first roadblock is creating and demonstrating that value. And I've seen that numerous times that, everyone does crowns, inlays, onlays, fillings. Okay. And there's definitely a difference between the level of care and the quality. But the most important aspect in getting a group or volume of patients that are interested in fee for service dentistry is demonstrating that value. And that can come from your personality, it can come from the results. Ideally it would come from a little bit of both of them, because that's the best package. It can also come from the practice. I feel like the most common thing people focus on is the practice looking beautiful, having like this type of setting, but it's become too common for beautiful practices to also be part of insurance and all these things. So it's a differentiator, it's standing out. And so creating that type of following. So I had started my first office in a blue collar neighborhood that was heavily insurance driven. Over the 3 to 4, the first 3 years for sure, I had already transitioned. I think by my second year, I was leaving most insurance networks except for the best reimbursing ones. And I was maybe losing a few patients that weren't there for that. So the attrition that you have when you start to switch, it's scary. But I'm like, you know what? You got to go down to go up sometimes. And I just started working at it, building it up, watching the numbers, but it went down a little bit and started coming back up. And there was a period where I was doing less dentistry, but making more because I was able to charge, like there was a time where my filling had to be $80 for something, and I was able to get it up to like 250 or $300. This is back in 2011, 12. And so I might be doing less fillings, but being able to do them at a higher fee. So the roadblock is knowing that you may lose some patients, knowing that it doesn't happen overnight. Every time I do like a lecture or a course, there's all these young dentists kind of asking me, how do you get to do what you're doing? And I'm like, it's a process. It's a work in process. You're always in progress. You're always working on getting there. You think they see like I'm where they want to be, but I'm where I am now, but not where I want to be. I'm still working on getting to that destination. So the roadblock, I think, is that it doesn't happen overnight and it takes time to develop, but you're investing your time. And when you look back at it, I don't think you would regret it, because it's freeing up your ability to do more of the type of work you want to do. And that's what we're all really after.
So, as someone who has a lot of experience in this, and you mentioned that it's going to be normal to lose patients and kind of see a decrease, is there a specific number where it's like, hey, you've decreased way too much and you need to change, something needs to change on how you're going about this?
I don't think there's a specific number, but obviously, unless you're prepared for it, you don't want to be dipping below your overhead costs. So like at the bottom as your overhead, you got to look at your staff, rent, supplies, materials, all that stuff. And you have to probably, if you're already hovering at that number, let's say you're starting from an insurance model and you're already hovering there, which is the reality these days. There's, my dad is remarried, and his wife is a dentist, and they just bought a practice. It's not profitable right now, and it's HMO and insurance, and they have to get to profit first. So right now they're covering, based on their loans and projections, a period of growth. So depending on where you are, if you're very profitable, you have a lot of room, but your bottom line is, your overhead, including a reasonable salary for yourself. Doesn't have to be your dream salary, but just, your bottom line, what you can cover your living expenses with. So if you start approaching that rapidly, and my advice always is, don't just cold turkey go. Like I eliminated some of the, this is what people do. You eliminate some of the networks that have the worst reimbursement, and you start playing it by ear. You start building up more patients that are here for fee for service. So you start seeing, okay, now I can drop this one and that one. You have to go little by little. There'll be a period that I think everyone will describe as awkward, where you're actually bummed when a patient has insurance or is in network, because you have to do the exact same thing for a fraction of the cost. So, but we all go through that. I did that too. At the time I did it, like for example, Delta Premier was paying pretty good. That was actually my target, to bring all my fee for service to that level. So it was easier back then, because I was like, okay, I'm just going to bring everything to this. If the insurance pays that much, great. At the time, nothing was paying like that did in my area. I was in an area that had the school district had Delta Premier, and it worked out well. So you have to set the target, and you're not going to set your fee to what you want it to be 10 years from now, or you're not going to set it to your dream fee, but you transition to it and then you raise it. And I also noticed that when people value your work, they're not going to, like, there's so many times where you raise your fees and you're afraid that everyone's going to run away. I mean, of course, if you go from like $500 to $5,000, they're going to run away. But when you go from 5 to 600, a fee for service patient isn't like, oh my God, it's 600. You know what I mean? It's the price sensitivity isn't within the 5 or 10% range. It's when things double or triple that they start to become really sensitive to that. So as you go, you raise your prices little by little when you feel like your schedule is busy. Because the way I think about it, time's the most valuable thing we have. And if I'm busy with my time, I'm not trying to, like, at one point I was trying to get more and more patients and stay till 8 o'clock at night and work myself to the ground. But now I want to work 40 hours, maybe 45 hours a week. It's not a low amount of dentistry, but I want to constantly be adjusting to provide reimbursement for my effort and time that is consistent with how I value my time.
Okay. And I think another thing that maybe our listeners would really benefit from, how did you start having those conversations with your patients as you were transitioning from, taking their insurance to the fee for service?
Yeah, so I first of all I kept that one. The I kept one or two. I know Premier, and I think there was one other Blue Cross one, like the gold level or something like that, that did well. I started to tell patients ahead of time. We sent a letter that we're going to be leaving the insurance network. We don't feel like we're able to provide the quality we want at these reimbursements. We're still happy to have you as a patient, and we will still submit it for you. However, we will be charging you, and reimbursements will come to you. I actually, this has been years, so I'm remembering there was actually a period where we would, right in between doing that, before we said that we would have them pay fully, we would estimate their insurance premium. We would take it from the insurance. They would pay the difference with the out of network fee, but we would tell them they're responsible. So the letter wasn't like, you're going to pay us fully. It was, you will be responsible for any portion your insurance doesn't cover. So that was step one, where we would still deal with insurance, but now we were freed from the ceiling or the price that they would pay. And we were also somewhat freed from, they might not cover an inlay. They might say that we're going to pay you for a filling, because, insurance oftentimes would see an inlay as something that is going to be downgraded to like either an amalgam filling or a composite filling. So we were freed from those things. And we would tell the patients that in the letter, but I'd also tell them that when they were in the chair. I feel like communication is key. And I saw this like quote the other day, and I shared it with all my staff. I don't remember exactly how it went, but it was something along the lines of, it's better to say something 10 times and over communicate than under communicate. And that's what I do. Like when I talk to patients, I'll say what's covered, what's not covered, how the process works more than once. Sometimes I had staff members tell me that, maybe you should keep it a little shorter. But I'm like, but our case acceptance is high. People feel like they trust me. I don't think so. Like, I think the natural reaction to most people is to keep things too succinct, too brief, when people feel more comfort in repetition.
So in that, right, you're giving that repetition not only with that letter that you sent, but also when they're in the chair. How did you extend that training to your staff so that they could continue to reiterate that and inform the patient when they check in and even when they check out?
Yeah, well, at my first office, it was like 800 square feet. And so the chair, like if I'm sitting right here, the front office was where that picture is behind me. So I could hear what they would say, whether I'm working, like, fast forward a couple of years, I have one assistant and one front desk now. I could hear, and I would constantly review. Okay. Review what they're saying, work on the verbiage and stuff like that to try to train. That this is one of those things I mean when I say it's very hard to be like amazing at everything. So systems right now, we have scripts, we have training, we have FAQs that the staff can reference, but it's still a work in progress. That's one of the hardest things, to be able to control what people say or train how to, react to these. But I was listening to it. I even had a service. This was before Weave was around, 2010, 2011. At least I believe that's the case, because I don't think it was here. But I had a service, I think it was called call measurement or something, but it would do recording the calls, and it would do some um, you could put like a dynamic phone number on your website. And then, so not only do you get where they're calling from, where they found you, like it helps you see they came from the website or they came from this, and then it recorded them. So I would listen to them. And now I don't have time for that. We have that feature in Weave, and every now and then we use the recordings for quality control. If there's any patient issue or someone says we didn't say something, very valuable. But at the beginning, it just had to be by devoting some time to that. Otherwise, you have to find someone to train and do all those things. But that's a really difficult thing to do.
Did you ever feel in incorporating all this and putting on many hats? So not only doing your fee for service concept, but also being a practice owner straight from graduation, that it affected your patient experience?
I didn't let it affect my practice experience because I was putting in extra hours. And I know a few people that get burned out from that type of thing. One of my good friends and business partners talks about this topic a lot, on the burnout and the stress from dentistry. And that's Kyle Stanley, and he was a business partner, is a business partner, and you can see how you have to be, to some degree, it's hard to balance these things. I don't have a great balance in some ways, but I'm working on that now. I was very committed to the profession. I still am, but it becomes where I was doing a lot of the things like training after hours or making notes so I could review it the next morning. It's hard to do 9 to 5 with that. So I figured it in investment phase. When you start a career, also one of the reasons why doing it early was amazing. Imagine you work somewhere for 5 years, 6 years, then you go open an office. We lose energy. Like I definitely noticed that I'm craving more free time and trying to make my systems fall in place and make things more automated or more efficient. But at that time, when you're right out of school, first few years, you have the energy, it's still part of your investment. I think it's a really good thing to try to do it early and get it going rather than delaying it, because if you do it during business hours, yes, it'll affect your patient experience. If you can do it after hours, no. And if you have tools that streamline it, it becomes very valuable, including the recordings. Because before recordings, what would you do? You'd have to maybe dedicate a little bit of time to overhear or, I'm going to spend this morning listening to how you handle calls and kind of give you some feedback. But with recordings, you free up the ability to do that at different times. And that was really beneficial.
So you really literally kind of hit the ground running and you had that momentum, knowing that there was going to be a few days, not even days, probably some time where you were
Yep.
spending extra time and effort. But
Yep.
now as you've done it, you have the free time and flexibility and full balance that you wanted in the beginning, right?
It's that's a work in progress. I have much more of it than before. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
at some point the dream becomes maybe 3 or 4 days a week of dentistry. Everyone says 5 days of dentistry is too much. Right now, I don't really have a choice, in the sense that I don't think we would meet our goals and be able to. I would have to downsize, and I value my team, and I don't want to do that. I could be comfortable doing a little bit less, but I would rather create more opportunity. So it's a process, and I definitely noticed. Okay, so about maybe past 6 months, I started talking to my staff, going, "Hey, we're not staying till 7 o'clock anymore. We used to have to like stay till 7 to not work on patients, but to do the treatment plan, review the wax ups, the restorations, all that stuff." I'm like, "What's happened? We're busier than before, and we're leaving at 5 o'clock now." And it was all those years, several years of setting things up, systems, treatment coordinator. Things are running more efficient. It didn't happen like a light switch. It happened steadily, so that like I was kind of like, oh, maybe 7 became 6:45, became 6:30, became 6. It's like things are running smoother, and we're not slower than before in terms of like patient care or treatment. It's just systems kick in, and I just want to keep that going, actually. And I want to extend it to having opportunities for other dentists to work for me in an environment where they can do this type of dentistry, because it's such a rare thing to be able to do a high level of dentistry without pressure from insurance and being um, you know basically pressured into doing faster and more treatment and over treating and stuff like that.
So one thing that you have mentioned a lot is that a work in progress. Do you think
Yes.
having that mindset of having a work in progress is what allowed you to be continually successful
Oh
versus,
my gosh.
all right, this is my end goal. I'm here. I'm good.
Yeah, so that's it's interesting you say that, because maybe 5 years ago, a patient of mine said, "Hey," he started working with us a little bit on social media stuff, and he had a good eye for that. And he's like, "Hey, you're a Kaizen. Have you ever heard of the term Kaizen? Have you personally?"
I
Either had
no,
I. He said, "Read the book." He said,
okay.
read the book. It's a Japanese philosophy. I Googled it, and it's a philosophy that continuous small improvements can reap major improvements. And it's a Japanese cultural thing and a philosophy where like companies such as Toyota embrace this concept. And it's this whole concept that there's like these 10 commandments of Kaizen, and it's like good enough is never good enough. Don't accept excuses, make it happen. If something just because something works, ask if it can be improved. Like there's all these different principles. And as I read them, I'm like, I totally agree with that. Like it's all about not accepting the status quo and to setting yourself to continuous improvement. So from that day, I embraced that. I said, that is what I am. And I also remember that even though I talk about it now, like it's always been part of me. I remember dreaming of reaching X point where I'm like, ah, finally, okay, now I can relax. But it's not really like that. It's when you reach that point, like I said, it's a work in progress. You see that there's more to do, but I also try to take one step back and realize I've gotten to where I wanted to get, and now I have new goals, but I have to be appreciative that I am accomplishing them. Otherwise, it feels like it's never ending and that you're like never achieving your goal. I am. I'm just constantly adjusting my goal because I'm in this mentality that if you stop trying to improve, you definitely will. That's a fact. The minute you decide I'm going to stop, that's when you do. But otherwise, there is no like peak. Like there's a saying that if you chase perfection, you can catch excellence, and that's because if you keep improving, you can actually get to the best version of yourself. And there's all these quotes that I love about that, but I that approach and what you had mentioned fit together where it's like you have to embrace that if you're trying to be either the best at what you do or to get better at what you do, it's just a work in progress.
So as you were explaining this concept, I kind of a light bulb moment that I feel like is like a duh, right? Where how we're constantly making these tiny improvements. But I think about just myself when I was 21 versus now. It's, yeah, I may have met a goal, but now my life's in a different place. Just how, technology and time is a different place. So there's new things to improve upon and to adjust to, even just manage and fit in the world today with the flow. And so I think that goes with that same concept of we can have these goals and they're great, but there will always be improvements because our lives are changing.
Changing. Yeah.
We're different people from we're 21 to 31, and the
Yeah.
world is changing at an exponential pace too. And so we have to change and adjust so that we can keep up with the times, essentially, right?
Yeah, when you make a goal, you're making a goal for the future based on what you know now. But when you get there, you know different things, and I've seen that a lot. A small example of that is when I was young, I truly believed I wanted to have kids and be married by age 30. When 26 came around, I'm like, holy crap, there's so much to do and there's so little time, and I can't imagine doing all that. And so you ask myself at 20, I'm like, that is my goal of success. Actually, like if I'm not married with kids at 30, I'm going to be an old father type thing. And when I got them, like, I don't feel old and I don't feel ready. So I'm going to adjust my expectations, and that's just one personal example, but it's kind of, I've noticed that when you think of the future, it's very hard to know how the future is going to unfold. So you're thinking about it with what you know today, but over the next 5 years, you learn so much stuff over 5 or 10 years where it's very hard to be that accurate. But what is accurate is the direction you're headed. You're going in the direction of whether it's improving your quality of life, your income, your practice, your success. As long as you're working towards it, you make those little mid-course adjustments to keep you moving.
So course correction in the direction you're going is
Key.
essential to the goals that
Absolutely.
you make for yourself.
Yeah, you can't be stubborn on those things. If something's not working, you gotta, like I have examples all the time where people say, "Oh, like this isn't working." I'm like, okay. Well, what can we do? In my office, I'm known as this is how, or the solution is. But there's people that say the problem is. They start the sentence with, "It's an excuse. This cannot be done because of this, this, and this." I'm like, no, but this is how we do it because I'm not going to accept that that is the limitation. I'm going to try to find a way around it, even if the way around it means, let's say the patient has to come back or that we have to remake something. It doesn't matter. You can't focus on excuses. You got to like really put your mind on how do we get to where we need to get. Whatever that is what we got to do.
So it's the same thing we're looking at. It's just a different perspective. We view it as a
Yeah.
problem versus viewing it as where here's our solution and how we're going to fix it.
Yep.
Right.
Very focused on that. Yep. Very focused on that.
Well, we are almost out of time. So we like to leave our listeners with a motivational tip. So if you could have listeners take one page out of your playbook of success, what would it be?
There's no better time than now. If you have these goals, people are always waiting for a better opportunity. You have to put your mind to it, get working on it now because, like I said, it doesn't happen fast. It takes time, and time is the most valuable asset. So you need to really get past all those excuses and get started with it now because when you look back, no matter where you're starting now, if you put time into something, you're always going to be happy with that investment.
Okay, put time into it now, and it's not going to happen overnight, but you will see that investment as you go. Awesome. Well, that is a wrap for today. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Nejad. It has been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure as well. This was awesome.
Yes. And thank you to everyone listening. Don't forget to join the Happy Practice Playbook Facebook group, where we'll be discussing this topic more and sharing other helpful resources to help you keep your people happy. As always, I'll be posting to get all of your tips and tricks as well. If you liked what you heard today, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next episode. We hope you'll join us next time. It's your girl, Mo Jones.